Chemistry. I was lucky to have a really good chemistry teacher, and she made it everything interesting, the experiments we did and the information that she gave to explain the experiments, and I became very interested and I really enjoyed the chemistry. I really enjoyed history too, but I didn't become a historian. I ended up being a chemist. That's not a pharmacist, that's a chemist. Finding a job as a teenager. In the early 1960s in Sydney, it was relatively easy to find a job. We all got the Sydney Morning Herald, and there'd be ads, women and girls and men and boys, separate ads. And you could look through the ads and apply for a job, and if you're lucky you could get one the next week. The first job I got was in 1962, and I was 15. I'd just finished school, and it was in a laboratory, and I got the job because I could do multiplication of decimals, and at the time Australia hadn't gone to the metric system, so the other 36 people who applied for the job couldn't multiply decimals, so that's how I got my first job. Safety at work. Back in the 60s, things were not very safe, I suppose. My second job was in a chemical plant that processed chromium ore, and it's a very reactive chemical, and you can make 6 or 8 different products. We had to get safety, we had to have medical checks regularly, and chest x-rays every 6 months because it was a dangerous chemical. I was 17 when I was there, and sometimes if there was a problem in the plant, one of us have to go out in the plant and get a special sample so we could analyse it urgently. And I'd go out there as a 17-year-old with a very long metal rod, or the metal rod would be out there, and they'd open up the furnace for me, and it'd probably be 1500 degrees centigrade. I have to stick this thing in, bring the sample out, put it in the container and take it back to the laboratory and do an urgent analysis on it. And I can't imagine they'd let kids of 17 do that nowadays. We used pipettes. We didn't have pipette fillers back then. We just sucked it. A pipette's a bit like a straw, and we just suck chemicals up in our mouth and transfer them around. So we got very good at it, because if you got it wrong, you burnt your tongue and your lips. When I worked at the power station, I went inside vessels. That's a condenser at the power station. The men reckoned my bottom was too big to fit in the hole, but I did fit. Equal pay. Back in the 60s, there was no such thing as equal pay. People weren't considered an adult till they were 21, so up until 21 you got junior wages. And women, well, I was lucky to get 75% of the junior wage, but some women didn't even get that. And the employees would take into account when they worked out your salary, whether you were male or female, how old you were, whether you'd done any study, where you were up to, and pay you what they thought on that basis. So later on in life, when I was working for equal pay, I made a point of doing my job. I never asked a man to do a job for me. If it was my job to do, I would do it. Some of the jobs I had to do was climbing towers and large tanks and things to get samples of oil and caustic soda and things like that. Sampling cyanide on top of a cyanide plant in full protective equipment. Gas, oxygen cylinders on your back and gas masks and things. But that was the job, so I did it, and I did it as safely as I could, and hopefully looked after the environment at the same time. I began looking at family history in about 1970, 72, I think. I've got two lines of my mother's family in Scotland that go back to the early 1700s. One of my husband's lines goes back to 1485, where one of them was fighting for King Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, where King Richard III lost, and that part of the family kept a very low profile for a few hundred years while the winners were in power. It's interesting when you can make a connection with a historical figure. It makes history come alive, and it's not just a whole lot of dates and places. My mother-in-law gave me a Bible, which was given as a present to her great-grandparents in 1865 when they were married in Melbourne. And in it, it had the date of her great-grandfather's birthday, and he was born in Launceston, in 1840. And I thought, why was he born in Launceston in 1840? Was he a convict or whatever? And it got me intrigued and started me researching her family history, which turned out to be really interesting too. Yvonne Cooper is a survivor, a family woman and a go-getter. I was a blood donor for over 40 years. I started when I was 21, and it's always been really important to me that, especially as I was a universal donor, my blood group can help anyone, so I tried to donate as often as I could. I also helped at the blood bank as a tea lady, but the tea lady at the blood bank is there not just to make a cup of tea, it's to be another pair of eyes for the nurses, so you can alert them if somebody has a reaction. So I found that very rewarding, and I liked helping people. I had a go at everything, so I did what was asked of me, even if I thought it was a bit strange for a woman to do. I did it the same as what was expected. I didn't use being a woman as an excuse not to do the proper job. I think young women today have got a lot of opportunities. They've probably got different pressures to what we had. Many a time had to do a job, and I would do it differently to the men, because I perhaps look at it from a different perspective, and I'd still get the job done, and I might get it done better and safer. But there's no reason why women can't do what they want to do today, as long as they live in Australia and not some other country. So yes, have a go.